Hi, I'm Lauren, and I work from home. My husband Daniel and I got married 3 years ago when we were both 33. We really wanted to have kids, so we went to a doctor to see if there were any problems that might make it hard for us to have a baby. Luckily, the doctor said everything was fine, which was a relief. But even after waiting for a while, we still weren't able to get pregnant. Just when we were starting to feel hopeless, Daniel suddenly said, "We need to have a baby to carry on the family line." I felt a bit confused by what he meant. Daniel is usually a good husband, but he tends to listen to his mom a lot. I'm not a big fan of his mom though. She always seems to like Daniel best, even though he has a younger sister. His sister didn't like this special treatment, so she moved out of the house early on. Daniel's job involves moving around a lot, but when we got married, he was working close to his parents' house. Before we tied the knot, he warned me that he might have to move for work, but I didn't mind. I believed that as long as we were together, I could adjust to living anywhere. However, when we found a place to live near his parents' house, my mother-in-law started showing up at our place a lot, especially on Daniel's days off and even when I was working from home. She always had something to criticize about how I did things like laundry or cleaning, which really bothered me. What's more, every time we saw each other, she'd pester us about having a grandchild, saying it had to be a boy, not a girl. Her constant presence made me feel stressed out. I tried telling Daniel about the problems with his mom, but he just keeps saying, "She's just trying to be friendly, Lauren." But it's not helpful when someone stresses you out instead of getting along with you. I used to admire Daniel's optimism, which I lack, and I thought we balanced each other well. But we can't seem to fix this issue. Finally, 6 months ago, Daniel got transferred for his job, so we moved away from his parents' place. Our new home is far from my parents' house too. Unlike the rural area around my parents' place, Daniel's new workplace is in a busier area, kind of like a small city in Nebraska, with good transportation and facilities. Plus, it's less than an hour's drive from my parents' house. Moving relieved a lot of my stress. I could focus on my work, and life felt better. Then recently, I found out I was pregnant. Daniel and I were overjoyed. I'm a bit worried because I'm older, but we've been wanting this pregnancy for so long. When we told his parents, my mother-in-law immediately asked if it was a boy. Even though we didn't know the gender yet, she insisted it had to be a boy, but the baby turned out to be a girl. When my mother-in-law found out, she called me when Daniel wasn't around and said, "You're really useless. What did you marry into this family for?" I don't know if it was because of hormones or just feeling emotionally overwhelmed, but I couldn't stop crying. When Daniel came home and saw me, he got angry. When I told him what happened, he yelled, "Are you saying my mom did something wrong?" That just made me cry even more. Despite all this, Daniel still takes care of me and helps with the housework, so he's a good husband as long as his mom isn't involved. I safely delivered the baby and went back home a month later. Daniel picked me up, and on our way home, to my surprise, my mother-in-law was there. I didn't expect her to come to see her granddaughter, but she did. I had a bad feeling, but Daniel was oblivious and happily said, "My mom came to help." While he was busy with our daughter, my mother-in-law pulled out a box of cake from the fridge. "This is to celebrate your childbirth. I'm sure you didn't get to enjoy any good food while you were out in the countryside for your postnatal recovery, did you?" I was annoyed by the way she said it, but tried to let it slide. "This cake costs $500, she exclaimed, handing me the box. $500. I was taken aback. I had never heard of such an expensive cake before. Nodding, my mother-in-law urged me to open it. I was curious to see what a $500 cake would look like. Excited, I placed the box on the table and opened it, but I was slightly disturbed by the smug look on my mother-in-law's face. The cake that came out of the box was not what you would expect from a $500 cake. The whipped cream was dried out, and the fruits on top were clearly canned oranges. I wondered which bakery would sell such a poor quality cake for that much money. I usually love sweets and can enjoy any cake, regardless of its price, but this was the first time I felt such disappointment the moment I opened a cake box. However, the story with my mother-in-law's cake didn't end there. I couldn't believe my eyes as I looked up from the cake. There she was, grinning. "So how's the $500 cake?" she asked. At that point, I lost my temper and threw the cake box and all into the trash. "Please leave." I shouted, surprised by my outburst. My husband rushed into the living room. Before I could say anything, my mother-in-law started crying. "Lauren is being so mean," she said, then pointed at the trash can. My husband looked at it and became furious. "What the hell have you done?" "That was a cake my mom went through all the trouble to make." As I lost the opportunity to mention the supposed $500 cake, my mother-in-law chimed in. "Yes, that's right. I made that cake for you, so it's worth $500. "Ah, so that's what it was. Of course, there's no way a cake like that could cost $500. Not even $50. Honestly, I wouldn't even buy it for $5. Everything finally clicked into place. No bakery would make such a disrespectful cake. As I was trying to process it all, my husband yelled, "Lauren, apologize to Mom." It seemed like he always took my mother-in-law's side, no matter what. I stood there in shock, but then I heard our daughter crying, so I rushed to her. There was some noise from the other side of the door, but right then, my priority was comforting my daughter. After I finally got her settled down and returned to the living room, I found a note saying they had gone out to eat and that I should think about what I'd done. I was stunned. I wondered if I could stay living here with my husband, but I didn't know if it would be right to go crying to my parents. But I had nowhere else to go. While I was pondering this, I glanced at the trash can where I'd thrown the cake. It was still there, untouched. On a whim, I decided to take a picture of it. When I called my parents and told them everything, my dad said he'd come pick me up right away. I felt sorry for my newborn daughter. We had to move again, but it was better for both of us than staying where we were. My husband, who was supposed to be out for a meal, didn't come home as quickly as expected. My father arrived first. As he started loading our stuff into his car, my husband and mother-in-law finally came home. They seemed surprised to see my father there and got angry when they saw him carrying my things. "Where are you going? Running to your parents again, huh? You always flee to them whenever things go wrong." His words were harsher than usual. It seemed he'd been drinking. His face was red and he smelled of alcohol. Seeing him like that, I lost my temper. "You went drinking after leaving us, your wife and your newborn daughter, at home. Right now, I don't want to be in the same space as you two. That's why I decided to rely on my parents." Then my mother-in-law, who also smelled of alcohol, chimed in. "Good riddance, a daughter-in-law like you is scary." Her comments always grated on my nerves. "Fine, as you wish. I'll take my daughter and go. So please enjoy your time alone with my husband Daniel." When I said this, my husband looked confused, but I ignored him and got into my father's car. It seemed like my father was trying to keep his emotions in check and didn't intervene. The next day, my husband contacted me. "Where are you?" I woke up and was surprised to find you gone. "All right, I had forgotten." Because he doesn't usually drink, but he tends to forget things when he does. I sighed. "Don't you remember? You left your hungry wife and daughter at home to go out to eat with your mother, and then you came back drunk. After being treated and spoken to like that, I couldn't stay there anymore." While my husband sounded surprised and flustered, I could hear my mother-in-law in the background. My anger from yesterday returned. "So your mother stayed over. I won't be going back to a home where such a rude person is staying." "What do you mean?" His voice lowered. "She might be your mother, but she's a stranger to me. I'm exhausted from childbirth and don't have the energy to be considerate of others. Who do you think was the cause of our infertility? It was because your mother kept visiting and stressing me out. Otherwise, there's no way I would have gotten pregnant so soon after we moved and she stopped visiting." I was relieved not to see her mother's face. "But when I came back home with our daughter, your mother was there, and I just can't stand this." Though I knew I was saying some hurtful things with all the resentment I had been holding back, I couldn't stop myself. And then my husband shouted over the phone, "You're the worst. Come back right now and apologize to my mom." When he said that, it felt like time had stopped for a moment. The next words that came out of my mouth were, "What?" As if to mock him, I continued, "The reason why I'm here with our child is because of your mother's request." When I said this coldly, my husband let out a confused sound. "What? What do you mean? Your mother didn't want her daughter. She's always been saying that, hasn't she? She wanted us to have a son." Well, I didn't know how serious she was, but I was sure when I saw that cake. "Cake? Did you see the chocolate plate?" "Huh, the chocolate plate on the cake? Or did you not even look at the cake itself?" I had hit the nail on the head. The trash can where I threw out yesterday's cake was still empty, so it was probably still the way it was yesterday. With that in mind, I instructed my husband to go look in the kitchen trash can. But there's nothing in here. Did she get rid of the evidence in the middle of the night? Then why don't you ask your mother what was written on the chocolate plate and where she threw it away? Then I could hear their exchange on the other end of the phone. She was denying knowledge of any chocolate plate, suggesting that I was being delusional. She stubbornly refused to reveal where she discarded it. So how will my husband respond? She's saying she doesn't know anything about any plate. Even my husband sounded a bit hesitant. A bit weak, right? Wouldn't it be awful if Daniel saw that plate? Even if it's a lot of trouble, you got rid of it before he saw it, right? To get rid of the evidence, I could hear my husband's voice darken in the background. Behind my confused husband, I heard my mother-in-law's voice. Why don't you hurry up and come home? Tell her to entertain me. She's a really useless daughter-in-law. At her words, my husband finally seemed to be attempting to rein in his mother. I'm going to hang up and send a text. Maybe you and your mother should read it together. Contact me again when you're ready to talk. After saying that, I ended the call. I sent all the photos of the cake and played them for my husband. Within 30 minutes, he called back and said he would be heading over here right away. I stopped him. My father-in-law should be getting there soon. Stay there. With that, I hung up. In reality, my own father had been so enraged by my husband's behavior yesterday that he had contacted my in-laws. He had reported everything to my father-in-law. Unaware of this, my father-in-law had apologized profusely and said that he would go to my husband and have a talk by evening. My husband and in-laws arrived at my parents' house. As soon as he arrived, my husband bowed deeply to me, apologizing. I don't know anything about what's been happening or what happened this time. I didn't know my mother said such things to Lauren. Looking at my seemingly repentant husband, I felt myself growing cold. Don't you think it's too late to say you didn't know? Didn't we have this conversation when we were living in our previous home? Despite that, you sided with your mother, saying she just wanted to get close to me and did nothing to change her attitude towards me and my words. My husband started to turn pale. Plus, you always said that your mom absolutely wanted us to have a son. What's that about? Are you always going to do whatever your mother says? Since you chose your mom over your wife, I guess you don't need me, do you? My husband turned pale and clung to me. That's not it. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. Then what did you mean? I retorted. My husband was at a loss for words and fell silent, looking down. Just as I thought, Daniel. You chose your mom over your own wife and daughter, a mother obsessed with her eldest son and a mama's boy. I should have realized sooner. It's no wonder your sister left home early. With this, my husband retorted, I'm not some mama's boy. I care about you too. Then could you really sever all ties with your mother? I fired back. At that, he fell silent. When I sighed, my mother-in-law, who was brought here by my father-in-law, yelled out, How can you say such a thing? Daniel and I are mother and son. We can never sever our ties. His father tried to calm her down, but she just wouldn't stop. To be frank, I never really liked you. I wanted a younger wife for Daniel, really. In that case, I'll be straightforward with you right now. I have divorce papers ready. If we divorce, then you and I can be strangers. Hearing this, my husband's face turned pale as he looked at me. I don't want to maintain a relationship with someone who would write these nasty things on my cake plate, I said coldly. Saying this, I pulled out my phone and showed everyone the picture of the plate that read, Take your daughter and leave. Upon seeing this, his father, perhaps not having been fully informed, angrily shouted at his wife, turning blue in the face. What you did to your own daughter, you did it against her daughter-in-law. I was shocked to hear this. Apparently, his mother had once served a birthday cake to her daughter with the words, I don't need a daughter, written on it, leading to their estrangement. Just how much she must hate women. Perhaps she thought she could get more attention by excluding the women close to her. Indeed, her son, Daniel, was acting just as she expected. When I handed my husband the divorce papers, he started making excuses. We just had a child. We shouldn't be getting a divorce. My mom just went a little too far this time. She was just jealous of you. Try to understand. Is that what you came here to say? I thought for sure you were going to tell me you were severing ties with your mother and coming back home. I'm never returning to that house. Then my father-in-law, who had been silent and pale-faced, spoke up. Daniel, sign the divorce papers. I'm done with this family. When I get home, I'm divorcing your mother too. What? His mother spun around at these unexpected words. I've thought about it a few times before, but I thought it was too late for a divorce and that I just needed to be patient. But now that I see you doing the same thing to another woman, I've reached my limit. Sign our divorce paper and leave our house. Begrudgingly, my husband signed the divorce papers under his father's direction. As a consolation, I received around $10,000 from his father. At first, I declined, but I accepted gratefully when he assured me it would be deducted from his wife's assets. My ex-in-laws really did get divorced, and his mother seemed to rely on Daniel. But he refused to take her in, blaming her for the circumstance. Indeed, the family fell out. His mother, who hadn't worked since they got married, lost all the money she received in the property division after investing it all in cryptocurrency, which someone had recommended to her as an easy way to make money. I received child support from Daniel every month, and now I'm raising our daughter with the help of my parents. I'm so happy to see our daughter growing up and doing great.